Hello, are you reacting to the current environment or creating your role? Dr. Demartini points out that dictators flourish where the people are disempowered. How can we best respond to legislation such as the Trusted Digital Identity Bill that aims to give complete power to one person, the Premier of Victoria? I've asked psychotherapist Anita Bentata to share her views about the roles many of us are playing: persecutor, victim, rescuer, and how to access the more empowering perspective of responsibility. Take it away.
Thank you. We've been having, off screen, some really interesting conversations about what's going on now and seeing it through the lens of my experience. So I'm a psychotherapist. I'm trained specifically beyond my university qualification about trauma and abuse. And that's also my personal backstory that got me into this work. And I've been working in the field now 26 years. So I've worked with a lot of people. I run a women's group, and I also run educative talks, and so I speak with a lot of people. And I wanted to share a little bit about what I've understood through the domestic violence journey and how I see it mirrored in what's going on now, because the parallels are just uncannily accurate with what's happening now as to
That's
what
what
other.
got us started to have this conversation. So, yes, keep going.
Yes, so there's, oh, will we do the screen share for that model?
Yes, I think you should be able to do that.
What I will, oh, one moment. Perhaps, no, before I screen share, I'll just give a little bit more backstory, because when I first started working as a psychotherapist, I was running domestic violence groups, and the women asked me, please write a book to explain why we stay, why we don't get out, because people don't understand. And when I got to being close to 50, I remembered this promise to the women, and I thought, I've got to keep my promise. It's important for me. And so I wrote my book, The Wolf in a Suit. And in writing that, it changed the way I worked, because I became more focused again on domestic violence, and I wanted to help change things in community, because I couldn't believe that we were still talking about the same things as decades ago and people weren't taking action, and there was so much more new information that wasn't getting talked about. And so I started doing educative talks. And I had so much new information that when I shared with people in smaller groups and one-on-one, was life-changing for people and really valuable. And so I thought, great, I'll do these talks and be able to, more people will be able to access this valuable information. But what I found was not many people came to the talks. People don't want to come and listen about domestic violence. Even women that have been in domestic violence don't want to use the word domestic violence, and they might say, oh, he's jealous, or, they'll make other excuses like he's had a stressful day or a stressful childhood or something else. And there's a lot of denial and minimization that's going on. And that's an involuntary thing that happens when we're in the stress response, because our frontal cortex shuts down and the blood flow goes to the amygdala, that survival center. So we're in a disconnected mode, and we're not seeing the whole of what's going on. And we're doing a lot of avoiding, minimizing, denying, which is what I'm also seeing happening out and about now. And people aren't comfortable to talk about what's really going on, the same as with domestic violence. And so what I started seeing with people not coming into talks was that how do I reach people with this valuable information if they don't want to come and they're not comfortable to talk about it and they don't have the emotional muscle? So I wanted to rethink how to get this information out there in a way that people could receive it. And so I started realizing that if we're talking about the problem, everybody's defense systems gets activated and we can't be with the solution. The mind that creates the solution isn't the mind that's inside the problem. And so I started thinking, well, what's the solution? And the solution is to for people to be connected to their thoughts, their feelings, their energy, their instinct, because then they can attune to what's going on and take action. Because one of the things that I used to ask women was, did you have early warning signs in hindsight after they'd escaped? And every single woman, including me, always said yes. So I thought, well, if we can listen to our inner guidance more and trust our inner reality over the outer reality, and think about like Little Red Riding Hood, she listens to what the wolf's saying when she asks what big eyes you have, what big ears. She's trusting outside of her over her inner guidance that says something's not right. And so I was seeing this with the women in domestic violence. And what I found was, when I've created my own model of resolving trauma, and we don't talk about abuse, red flags, the steps to get out, any of those things that traditional DV services talk about, women started getting out of their own accord because they were being connected in their brain and their body, and they were connected to their life energy, and because they were learning how to stay aligned with themselves no matter what was going on around them, they could remain steady and take action. They had the energy and the clarity to take action. So when I started seeing all of those patterns with people in domestic violence, and I also could see the way government is being like the person who uses abuse, and I'll read out my definition. Domestic violence is a pattern of denial, control, and punishing behavior within, I've got intimate relationship, but we're talking about any relationship here, yeah, because violations can happen from one person to another through the use of force. When that threat, I wanted to, no, not that paragraph. Was so when a person repeatedly denies and overrides the rights, realities, and needs of another person, punishing and shaming them to extinguish their right to have their own response in their own surroundings. And that to me was, I found a more clear definition of domestic violence. And when we can, very often people don't recognize domestic violence, because if you look at the Family Violence Act, it doesn't even specify the definition. And I actually have closed what I sent you, so I've just got to find it.
All right, so while you're doing that,
Yes.
I'm going to do another, I'll show everyone again the cover of your book. So this is The Wolf in a Suit by Anita Ben-Tata, and it goes into all of her experience as a psychotherapist and drawing upon her own journey in an abusive relationship. And she uses a lot of models from myth and fairy tale and all of that to teach different and more empowering ways of dealing with those circumstances. This is my book. So I'm the author of a number of empowering novels for youth and adults. This one is about a boy whose father has cancer and goes into a kind of fantasy world with creators and reactors. So are we reacting to the world around us, or are we creating the world we want to experience? So there we go. Are you ready?
Yeah.
That was a little ad break.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Now.
Okay, so the thing that I found is, and these are all parallels if you think about what's happening in the world today, yeah? So when I used to do my DV talks, I used to ask people, who wants to explain what domestic violence is? What do you understand the definition is? And most people would say, they'd start listing the types of abuse. It's physical abuse, it's sexual abuse, it's, you know, they're the ones that are most common that people recognize. And I would say, no, that's types of abuse. It's not the definition of abuse. And even the Family Violence Protection Act, for me, the meaning of family violence is really inadequate, because they list it as behaviour by a person towards a family member of that person if that behaviour is physically or sexually abusive, or emotionally or psychologically abusive, or economically abusive, or threatening or coercive, or is in any way controls or dominates a family member and causes the family member to feel fear for the safety or well-being of that family member or another person. Now, that's real. All of those terms are dependent on how you interpret what is emotional or psychological or physical abuse. So you might not recognize it. And if we live in a society that is so unclear about what is bullying, violating, abusive, then it's understandable that we're in this dynamic right now that people can't recognize what's going on, because we've been shaped to not be able to recognize it. Because the Family Violence Act doesn't put it clearly compared to my definition, where it's, you know, I'm describing the specific things, the concrete specific things, rather than global terms that people are going to project their interpretation about what that means. Because if you just list it as physical or sexual abuse, it depends what you define within the umbrella of those terms as what's physically abusive. What's considered physically abusive is not just a physical impact on your body. It's also if someone, say, punches the wall or throws something and smashes something physically, because when you're in a state of trauma, your system says, he's got that much force, that much power. I don't know if next time it's going to happen to me. So that's still counted as physical abuse. And you can look at that with what's happening, what you see in the media, what you hear about the fines, the threats about the fines, that physical abuse that still says, well, I don't want that physical force to come onto me. So we really need to be more clear about how we define things, because if we don't define it, then we make mislabeling and misinterpretations and have inaccurate perceptions. So I'm seeing that dynamic happen a lot, because there's a lot of mislabeling going on. The other thing that I'm seeing going on is in domestic violence, very often if you go to someone that you can see is in an abusive relationship and you say to them, he shouldn't be treating you that way, you deserve better, all of those things that you think sound good, the person that's inside of that has their frontal cortex shut down is going to go very often into denial and align with the person who's using abuse, like the Stockholm syndrome, where they align with the perpetrator, and because they're revolving around the person who's dominating's reality, and they've disowned and disconnected from their own reality. And so if we've got two groups of people in society right now, and one group is saying we've got to follow the guidelines, it's mandatory and all of this, and we've got other people that are saying, but I have a sovereign right, and this is a trauma to my system to put something into my system that I do not want to. I have other ways of being able to look after my health, and I have the right to choose those other ways. So we've got two different perspectives going on, and the same with domestic violence. And so if you just, with domestic violence, if you come up to someone who's living in abuse and say, but you deserve better than this, you're doing another version of what the other person is doing to them, because you're saying, be with my reality rather than your reality. Your reality is wrong. You've got it mixed up. And I'm seeing that happen out in the world, that we're still in a polarity of right and wrong, and the drama triangle of persecutor, rescuer, and victim. And whenever you're in one of those roles, you're in a drama, and you're not staying with your center of for yourself. So there's so much that I could unpack about domestic violence and what is going on. That I'm not sure, perhaps one of the models, do you want me to show that model of
The
the
triangle, do you mean?
or no, the circle one?
Yours, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. The other circle one.
Oh, okay. Yes,
There's
yes.
so many
Sure.
models.
Yes, we were talking about a few things before.
Yeah, yeah. So
So while you're looking for that, I'll just mention that one of my reasons for wanting to have this conversation with Anita is because of this new Trusted Digital Identity Bill that enables the Premier of Victoria to declare a state of permanent pandemic, where he can restrict movement of people at his discretion, stop us working, require us to undergo medical examination, testing, treatment, target a specific group of people, fine people up to 90,000 or 2 years jail if they refuse to comply. So some pretty intense legislation that puts him kind of in that role of a dictator. And so I was interested when Anita talked about government playing the role of an abusive partner. And I just thought, wow, that's a really great and important way of seeing it. And so, of course, her specialty is how to empower women to escape that dynamic or to recreate their lives in a much more empowering sort of way. And so this analogy applies now exactly as she's just been saying. How are we responding to, or are we responding to this new legislation, all this stuff that's happening, and the QR codes and the vaccine mandates and all that sort of stuff? Are we reacting to it as victims, or are we reacting as rescuers, where we're trying to educate the people around us to what we're perceiving as persecution? Or can we step into the model Anita teaches of responsibility? And I'll hand back to you now. You can talk about all your circles, all your circle models.
There's so many models. I have so many models in my book, but we're visual creatures. We like to see things visually.
Image making brains.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll see if I can still share the screen. Yeah. So can you see? I'm sorry, I can't get it bigger than that. Can you
actually
see
you had it bigger and then it went smaller?
Oh, really? It was bigger. Yeah. That's bigger, is it?
Better. That's good.
Okay. All right. So this is a model that's been used in the field of counselling for decades. It's the Dulles model, and it shows about the cycle, the power and control to do with domestic violence. And so if you think about it in regards to whether personal relationships, whether workplaces, whether family members or the government, if we just go through the different sections, there's coercion and threats, making and or carrying out threats to do something to hurt someone, report someone, that says commit suicide, but these are just examples. But the suicide rate has increased.
That's right.
As well as deaths through the vaccinations. Forcing someone to, it says here, making someone drop charges or making someone do illegal things. So, according to common law, all of what's being asked is not law right now. They're coercive guidelines. Mandatory is not legal. It's not law. So there's a lot of coercion and threats for curfews for the 5 kilometre range, for the, given I'm living in Melbourne, for the fines if you're out longer or out doing something that someone else says you shouldn't be doing. They're making your natural sovereign right to be in the world as you choose to be with doing no harm, they're making it illegal to do that. So there's an enormous amount of coercion and threats. there's a timid intimidation. Like, think about the police that they've even changed their uniform, and even the cars, they're more like machine tanks, kind of
Yeah.
warfare. That we've seen the media, things of people being physically harmed. There's also, evidence of people that are actors that are part of creating, dynamics where they're like punching the horse or getting punched by the police. That there's, so there's all these stories to coerce, threat, and intimidate. So there's another section there of intimidation, making someone afraid by what, visuals, by actions, by gestures, destroying things, displaying weapons. Like, we're getting so much of that intimidation, creating the marshals, wanting people to tell on other people. There's so much coercion, threats, and intimidation right now. Emotional abuse, the putting down that's happening about people that are pro-choice, that have other ways of looking after their health, is just extraordinary, and dividing families and friends and marriages that are really impacted, and lifelong friendships that are impacted. So the emotional abuse, putting someone down, making someone feel bad for being themselves, calling someone names. Well, we've all heard on both sides of the fence, sheep, you're not woke, awake, all the
conspiracy
labels.
theorists.
Yeah, conspiracy theorists. There's you're not caring for all of our health. What you're doing is selfish. Like, there's a, remember, abuse, and for me, there's an importance to talk about. There's abuse where it's a pattern of unrelenting control, denial, and punishment. Yeah. So that's what abuse is. It's a pattern of that. And that's what the government is doing. It's unrelenting. It's on our phones. It's on the billboards. It's on signs. It's on the radio. It's on the TV. There's so much of that unrelenting emotional abuse, intimidation, coercion, and threats. There's also, to differentiate, there's toxic relationships where two people are doing things that can be listed as abusive behaviors, but from my perspective, sometimes people get caught in toxic relationships. But to me, what's happening with the government is not a toxic relationship, because there's evidence of it, from years ago. This has been set up as it was planned to happen at this time. So this is not a toxic relationship. This is abusive. It is intentional. Yes. And in abusive relationships, people often say, "Oh, they're losing control," or but what anyone that's been in an abusive relationship will know is that the person that uses abuse does not lose control and damage their own property. It always happens that it's the children's or the partner's property that's damaged, or other people don't see the abuse. It happens behind closed doors. So they're indicators of it. It is being thought out. It's not someone losing control. And the same with what's happening in the government now. This has been planned. There's enough evidence that shows that. So if we come along beyond the emotional abuse, so when we're going around the circle, there's isolation.
Say no more.
Yeah. So controlling what someone does, who they see, who they talk to, what they need, where they go, limiting their outside involvement. And it says using jealousy to justify actions, but there's more than jealousy. It's, it's using coercion. It's using threats to justify actions. It's using their own story of what that, there's that coercion to, you be with my reality. I don't want you to be with your reality. You've got to be with my reality. And in domestic violence and abuse, what happens is, and all these diagrams are in my book, you're circling around their reality. You're walking on eggshells because you don't want them to get upset. And so you deny and you minimize your own reality because of the impact of what their reality could do on you. And so it's a repetition that often happens gradually that you don't even realize it, because what I always say is human beings are adaptable. That's why we've survived beyond some other species. We're so good at adapting, but we adapt to the terrible as well as the good.
Yes.
And people have adapted over the last 2 years extraordinarily well. And then what you adapt to becomes normal. And you hear about people not wanting to take their masks off, not wanting to go outside when they can. There's that. All of that adaptability, but coming back to, so there's all that isolation and all the different ways of being able to justify, and people learn to revolve around the person who they're scared of what impact will come. And the fines have been put at such illogical, extraordinary amounts of money that it hits on people's fear of survival. And as soon as you target someone's fear of survival, then and they get activated into that, then you've got them, because they will do whatever you want to survive. And you know, in the hierarchy of needs, survival's the most important. So people will relinquish so much of their choices and their perceptions to say, because it's just a life death struggle right now for a lot of people, particularly with the people being stood down and losing their jobs and not knowing how they'll pay for their house or to provide for the family. So then we've got this other point in the circle: minimizing, denying and blaming. Well, again, we've already kind of touched on that with the emotional abuse. There's been so much minimizing. You know, COVID has a 99 or around 99% recovery rate, and the flu deaths have gone down extraordinarily since COVID's come on the scene. And so, you know, the people that are dying, from my understanding, is they're dying where they would have died naturally because of the elderly and with the flu and with the other comorbidities of what else they have, what's going on, but also because there's been so much incorrect information being provided about what's happening with people's health. Is that, like in the beginning when people were put on ventilators, which killed the people, it didn't support the symptoms of what was going on. But we know that there are medications that have been made illegal now, that when people go on them, and I've even heard of doctors saying things like, if you get the antibiotics in straight away, you know, there's lots of doctors that their patients have all recovered really quickly. And there's been areas, large populations like in India that ivermectin, that where they're fine. So there's been a lot of things that have been blamed, and it's just incorrect information. So there's minimizing, denying, blaming, making light of abuse. So there's the new normal. There's the making light of what's going on right now. And we're in this together. And, you know, all of these false perceptions that people are getting bombarded by, not taking the person who's being abused concerned seriously. Well, we know that there's many people that are concerned about what's going on, and they've been shut down or threatened to be jailed, like doctors. You know, there's a whole lot of minimizing, denying, blaming, threats. Okay, saying the abuse didn't happen. So saying like the deaths that are happening now are more from the vaccination than from COVID, but it's being blamed on COVID and all the variants, and you know, or the Delta variant, it's even stronger now. And
and the whole 14-day period from the time of the jab, you know, that first 14 days, they're saying any adverse events in those 14 days are not to do with the jab. That's
Yeah.
just random. That's a coincidence. So that's a whole lot of minimizing and denying going on there as well.
Yes, yes, there's so many layers of it. And like earlier on last year, when someone did the COVID tests on fruit,
It's
and
like the papaya and
yeah,
the
yeah,
goat or whatever. And
yeah, and so the PCR tests aren't accurate. And the guy that was involved with developing the PCR tests has acknowledged that. So
we're
there's
not designed to
yeah, yeah.
prescribe, to diagnose. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of minimizing, denying, and blaming, and the misuse of information. And that's what con people do. They get a little bit of truth and they mix it with other things that are going on. And this is people who use abuse as their tactic to control other people, are very good at being persuasive. And one of the things that I've found is that a lot of the time abuse is about different realities, and how do you prove your reality? And so there's a frustration with someone that's living with abuse because it's my reality over your reality. And so there's a bit of that dynamic happening now when people don't have access to certain levels of proof, or it's being censored. Well, there's the minimizing, the denying and blaming with the amount of censorship that's going on. Um, Shifting responsibility for abusive behavior. Well, we know that's happening right now, that there's a lot of blame that the unvaccinated are causing all the problems, and saying that they've caused it. So that's exactly what's happening in this circle here. Using children, like we're seeing that happening where more, and it was originally going to be just for the elderly, and then it's coming down in ages, and now, to the, and using children with getting children wearing masks, and not being able to sit near their friends, or play with their friends, or the taped parks that the children weren't even allowed to go play on the equipment and move their bodies and be out and get vitamin D.
The child abuse is phenomenal.
Yeah, and children not being able to see everybody's faces properly, and for learning to speak, or the children that are still growing up, and their world is forming right now. So with using children, what it says here is making you feel guilty about the children. So it's like, saying you need to do this to keep the children safe, kind of thing, or using the children to relay messages. Well, I guess a lot of people probably would have heard of how the government are even talking directly to children, saying you have the right to not tell your parents that you're getting vaccinated, and bypass the parents. So there's a whole lot of abuse of power and control there.
And I think there are some cases of threatening to take children away from parents who won't get them jabbed.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we come to economic abuse. Well, with shutting everybody's capacity to work down, there's an enormous amount of economic abuse. And that is, I keep hearing about beautiful businesses that are having to close down. And it's extraordinary. So preventing someone from being able to keep or maintain their job or their business, making someone ask for money. So, providing the Centrelink things, but then you're totally in their power of control. It's like you've got to do what they want to continue to receive the money, and the money can drop less and less money, but the demand increase more and more. Giving an allowance, taking that person's money, not letting them know or have access to family income. So there's an enormous amount of economic abuse happening. Male privilege. When we're talking about domestic violence, of course, there is also women that abuse men, and I've worked with men in those instances. And there's also, I've worked with people that have same-sex relationships with abusive. So for me, absolutely, there is male privilege but I don't call it male privilege. I call it the left brain privilege more, because whether you're male or female, it's the left brain qualities that have dominated our society, and the ones that don't allow the whole of a person. So whether you're a man or a woman, the left brain qualities is the mathematical, the logical, the sequential, the physical, the detail, the analyzing, those kinds of things. Whereas the right brain is more connected to the feminine principle, which is the body, the energy, the unknown, the big picture, the abstract. And they've been devalued and laughed at, like it doesn't, you know, when someone speaks, it's not necessarily the words of what they say, but it's the tone as well, and the look as well. Someone can say something like that, you know, police often say to someone who's in domestic violence and fearful for their life, well, unless you've got, and I've heard this from women who have spoken to police, unless you're bleeding or, you know, you've been injured, then there's nothing that we can do. And so there's that denial, there's that left brain principle of only taking this as valid and real, but the other elements are not considered valid or real. And for me, they sit more with the right brain principle.
Yeah, so the more subtle things like feelings and intuitions and, you know, that sort of stuff has been downplayed.
Yes. And so when we're talking about male privilege, I just think that's a very global kind of thing. For me, it's more about the people, whether they're male or female, because women can have be aligned with, I don't think of it as male privilege, I think of it as the patriarchal privilege, because this is not just with men. So treating someone like a servant, making all the big decisions, not allowing someone to make their own significant decisions, acting like the master of the castle, being the one to define the choices of men and women, who has power, who doesn't, who has rights, who doesn't. So I guess I'm just wanting to just fine tune that element of that circle with, because not every man is associated with this. I think so. But as you can see, that whole circle of power and control is very aligned with what's happening right now.
And the kind of role government has been playing.
Yes.
And that's exactly, it's stunning. This is a stunning indictment, really.
Yeah. And if we look at the types of abuse, I'll stop that share. If we look at the types of abuse, because there's about 17 different forms of abuse, emotional, psychological, there's also legal abuse. And we're seeing that happen right now on a huge level too, of people's being given illegal fines, you know, all the court cases being squashed, the overriding of not allowing certain information into the conversation.
And things like, well, we can't release that information because the people would lose faith in the government or the leadership. But surely if that information reveals poor behaviour, we should lose faith in them, so we should be aware of it. So that level of control as well is...
And there's what that is to me is that very left brain, that masculine principle that's disconnected from the feminine principle, disconnected from the right brain, that becomes very fixed and very rigid. And the feminine principle on the right brain is about being inclusive, is about being flexibly responsive, is receptive. Yeah. And so unless we have that, then the information that the left brain has is not accurate to the whole of what's going on. And there's mislabeling then that is going on. So I'm I'm not sure. Do you want me to show the drama triangle or the?
Yeah, if you've got it handy, I think that's useful for people to see. And then I think we need to go into the solution kind of side
Yeah,
of things so that will flow nicer, because then you'll go to your circle.
yeah, yeah. So you can see that all right?
Yep, perfect.
Is
Don't
that
need to do
better?
anything. No, it was better
Right.
before.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay. All right. So this is again another model that is used in therapy, and it's called the drama triangle, thanks to Stephen Karpman, and it's also in my book. And there's 3 positions, and people are not necessarily fixed in one. They might jump from one to the other. So there's the persecutor, the rescuer, and the victim. And I guess they're pretty explicit of each of those roles. But each of those roles is over involved in another person. The persecutor is over involved with controlling the victim. The victim is over involved with appeasing the persecutor. The rescuer is over involved with protecting the victim or trying to save the victim.
Yeah.
It's just the general summary of it. And whenever we're in one of those positions, we're in drama. And as long as we keep engaging in one of those positions, so, you know, even for people that are concerned about what's the rights of people and wanting everybody to, you know, wake up to more information, you know, they're still in that drama triangle, and it still is creating a lot of stress and wears people out. You get burnt out because when you're talking about these things, it's lighting up the same part of the brain as if you were in those instances, if you've been in those instances in the past. The brain doesn't differentiate. So it's deepening the neural pathways of all of these traumatic dynamics and patterns. And so, you know, we don't want to be in a drama triangle, or I don't want to be in a drama triangle. It's what, just as what I've said, I think I said that before, that in my program last year, we didn't talk at all about red flags or how to get out. It was all about looking after the self. And when you look after the self, your system naturally gets out of this drama triangle. So if we go down, this is just an excerpt from my book. I called it the circle of responsibility. We need to be responsible for ourselves. And but to do that, we've got to have the ability to respond. And if you're in a stress response or overwhelmed, then your ability to respond is limited because you've gone into a defense pattern and a stress pattern. And so you don't have your freedom of choice to respond. But for me, when I was writing my book, I was thinking, well, if we don't want to be in the drama triangle, what do we need in this responsibility, this ability to respond? And for me, it's the ability to attune to how we're vulnerable, the ability to self-soothe ourselves, take care of ourselves, regulate ourselves, be aware of ourselves, care for ourselves, make ourselves the most important, and to be able to, with that assertion, it's to take action, yeah, and to have that heartfelt empathy for ourselves. Because what I realized when I was doing those domestic violence talks, and I wasn't getting the numbers that I expected for the value of what I could provide, was that people don't want to be in the drama triangle, and people aren't revolving around how they feel. We're over focused, being social creatures, about, is this right according to someone else? Will someone else think I'm a good person or doing the right thing? And so we're so much revolved around first our parents, then the school teacher, maybe a boss or a partner, that we don't realize how filtered we are to keeping the peace, walking on eggshells, making sure that we're not affecting someone else. And so we need to have that empathy for ourselves and that instinct that can flow from our feelings and our energy. I wrote this in 2016. I would change some of these words now. So as opposed to assertive and empathic, I think I would put like instinct, that inclusivity and that permission to revolve around what feels good for you. Because what I saw was, if everybody, instead of educating about red flags, because red flags can be very deceptive because of the psychological and emotional distortions that are going on. But if you're attuned to how you feel and you follow as a priority how you feel, you don't have to worry about looking for red flags. You will go, this doesn't feel right. And the more the individual does that, then the people who use abuse are going to have less people to capture, because everybody's going to be in tune not just to their conscious self, but there's also things that we can pick up on an unconscious level, on a body level, on an energy level. I always say we're more non-physical than physical. Our life energy is non-physical. Our thoughts are non-physical. Our feelings are non-physical. We are more non-physical. It's not woo-woo. And when the more we can attune to our non-physical, we can know information before the conscious mind is aware of it. And there's experiments that you can do to trust that more. I did a range of experiments over a range of years to be able to trust that. And that when you can trust that inner guidance, then there's less room, rather than trying to get other people to recognize certain things. The more everybody owns their own ability to respond, then the less other people can manipulate you. And that's where we have our power. We have our power in ourselves. And people are influenced by how you are more than what you say. So the more you do that in yourself, the more other people, it creates a ripple effect in your community. And that, I believe, has a far greater capacity to create change on a national and global level than trying to force someone's reality, because otherwise we're being like the person living with abuse, and they've got one person on, the perpetrator, wanting them to be with their reality, and they've got other people saying, no, be with my reality. And they're caught in a conflict, internal conflict.
So you're saying your essential response to the current, the environment we're in now, where people are being kind of battered back and forth between government mandates and different opinions and advice, and their fears for their families, and, you know, like all of this big emotional stuff, is to just go within into their feelings and have an internal guidance system, basically, of their feelings, their instinct, their body sensations, and have those things guide them in their choices and responses to what's going on. Are you saying that in doing that, they're going to be guided into more productive choices and behaviors and responses, and be less at the effect of everything, whether emotionally or in practical ways?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what I find is, if you're in that trying to convince people, you're in a polarity and you're feeling out of control, and you're doing another version of what's happening, where it's like, I need you to be a particular way for me to feel safe and to know everything's going to work out. And so you're handing your power over. And so everybody needs to be able, I think the reason why we have so much everybody's trying to convince everyone else to be with their reality is because we're in a spiritual crisis. We've lost faith in all that's greater than us. And so we're wanting to convince everyone on a cognitive, rational level to believe the reality that we have. If we trusted all that is, we wouldn't be worried so much and wouldn't be in so much fear. And we would be guided to make the best decisions, and to know that we would be looked after and things could work out. And I sometimes give the example of our grandmother, who was going through in Poland with our mother and trying to escape to feel safe from the Nazis. And at that time, with the curfews going on, if you were out after a certain time at night, then it was presumed you were Jewish, and you could get taken in and exterminated. And one night in the dark, a man came on a bicycle and whispered to our grandmother, follow me. And she didn't know, is he someone I can follow that's a genuine good person, or is this a trick? And she had to follow her inner guidance, and she followed him, and he led her to safety for the night. And so it's like, if our left brain is trying to perceive how to fix this and work things out, it can't know, because the left brain's sequential and rational. It can't know the unknown. We've got to have a connection to our spirituality and all that is, to be able to hand over and trust. And when we don't have that, we over rely on forcing everyone to be with our reality. And otherwise, but there's instances like that example where there's divine guidance and the intuition of, I'll follow or I won't follow, I'll run, kind of thing. Like you hear about the stories in World War II where the people were on the trains that they were told was going to a good place, but it was going to the camps. And then some people jumping out and rolling, escaping and getting away and living on the land or in the forests and surviving.
Yeah.
So we always have access to divine guidance, that if we've got to stop over relying on what we see that's right out in front of us, because that's just a momentum of everything that's been. And the more, like, one of the metaphors I give my community is, when we're walking, we're not looking under our feet where we are, we're always looking ahead of where we want to get to. If we look under our feet of where we are, we're going to fall, we're going to crash into something. And so we're so
post the the tree,
the post, absolutely,
other people.
And so we need to be able to be aware of where we are, but be expansive beyond that. And the more we're over focused on the left brain and convincing and education and everything, it's education is important, but education doesn't change actions. This is one of the things I say with domestic violence. It's like, someone can know he shouldn't talk to me that way, he shouldn't do that, or we should know I should eat more greens or go to bed earlier or move more. Education doesn't mobilize us. What mobilizes us is feelings, either pleasure or pain. And either, say, we get a diagnosis or a symptom and our fear mobilizes us to do something, or that we have pleasure, like someone's getting married and we want to lose some weight, and so we get motivated to, it's feelings activates behaviors and creates change in neural pathways and in our actions. And so we need to be able to, rather than trying to rationalize with each other, because everybody's going to want to defend, because there's a whole series of identity and justifications and fears and inner conflicts that are stronger than any rational argument. And so the more we can be attuned to looking after ourselves, the divine guidance will come. And I think of there's so many examples, like with our grandmother, like when she was taken in and interrogated at one time, but a friend of hers had given her rosary beads, and she'd gone to church before the war had started, so she knew what to do. So she was kneeling down and being with the rosary bead. It's like trusting that there's more that can look after us and get us through. And then she came out of it, and we had the capacity to be born and be passionate about having, that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about being free. But the other reason is from my own personal experience of domestic violence, because I felt such relief when I escaped, and then felt so devastated when he started doing legal abuse. And so it was like, oh, he's still going to try and punish and control me, and I'll never be free, kind of thing. And so I made a promise to myself, well, no matter what he does outside of me, I'm going to be free within me. And that, I think, has held me in good stead through these last 2 years, because I've developed some skills as to, well, how do you be free? How do you, and when you're from that mindset, you come across different information, different people. It's like, you know, when you go shopping and you've got in your mind what you want to buy. So out of all of the products, you'll find that what you want, because it matches what's inside, what you're looking for, and you don't see other things. Or like when I bought a car, suddenly I saw that brand of car or that color car everywhere. And so it's like what's inside here is what our system filters, because there's so much outside of us and it matches it. And so the more you can be mindful about, well, what's here, and am I fixed? Am I in a rescuer mode? Am I in a fear mode? What's motivating me? Is it inspiration or is it fear? Then, you know, so that we can be free no matter what's going on around us. And then different things happen in our life, and you don't have to join that other reality.
This has been an amazing conversation, presentation by you. You know, like the metaphor of that circle that you showed of the abuse, and how neatly that fits over the top of what the government has been doing through this pandemic, is extraordinary. And your model, the other circle, the empowering model to escape the drama triangle of the persecutor, victim and rescuer, is really, really important. So I would like you to now share with people how they can connect with you, reach out to you, and any last words that you would like to share, because clearly what you've got is some very, very, very useful strategies for helping people free themselves from whatever role they've been playing and be more empowered and create their reality instead of reacting to the world.
Because the more you react to what someone else is saying and their idea as to what is they're expecting will unfold, the more you're revolving around their reality, and you're helping build their reality by adding fear or adding anger to it. Because either way, whether it's fear or anger, you're inside his circle. And, you know, I'll often, you know, if you, maybe I can just draw this, because this is something that I show with women to do with domestic violence. I'll do, there's so many different models of circles and triangles that I have. Oh, hold on.
the next day, while you're doing that, for those who don't know, yes, we are sisters. So that's why Anita was talking about our grandmother.
Yeah.
So you can probably see some features that are shared. Anyway, keep going.
Okay, so see this, these are the two circles, and it's overlapped, and there's a big overlap here, whereas there's a little overlap here. So this is like in a healthy relationship, there's two individuals, and here's the relationship, the third body. And there's a sense of self here for each person, and they're both looking after the relationship. Here there's a bigger part out, and there's a little bit of that person, and they're swallowed up by the relationship. So that would be more what we'd see for a unhealthy relationship as opposed to a healthy relationship.
So the one where it's the bigger part out, that's the sort of more the abusive person. Whose reality is controlling the person who's only got a little bit of self showing. You know what? I would never have necessarily said I was in an abusive relationship, but in one of my previous relationship, I tested up by a kinesiologist, not as I am me, but as I am him. And that was the degree to which I had absorbed his set of values and all the rest of it, and was, you know, bending myself to his needs and made myself small and insignificant.
So possibly toxic
Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily happen in a really explicitly abusive sort of relationship. It can be quite a subtle thing where we've
absolutely,
you know.
yeah. This is that's one of the reasons why after a while with what I got to in my work, I thought actually it doesn't matter whether you define you're in a toxic relationship or abusive relationship. If you're not feeling happy, lighthearted, able to be spontaneous, then there's an issue. And we don't have to work out what's going on in the relationship. It's like, well, what do I need to do for me to be able to reconnect to my essence? Because I also, I've worked with a range of different people. And, one woman I was working with one time who, she wouldn't have defined that she was in an abusive relationship, and I wouldn't either. But I could see there were toxic elements in it. And one day she revisited therapy with me after a number of years, and she was coming back because she'd met someone and she didn't want to have an affair, but she was trying to do, what do I work out? Do I leave this relationship that I think is a good relationship, or do I stay with this? Do I take a leap of faith in this person that I feel an ignited feeling for? And over a series of sessions when we worked, we unpacked what was happening in her current relationship that she didn't define as toxic or abusive, but I saw there was controlling elements in it. And what she came to recognize of her own accord was that she'd lost an aspect of herself that was being lit up in this new connection with someone. And in this new connection, she felt alive and she felt her whole self. And she realized, so then we explored, well, do you want to bring that part of yourself that you've lost in this relationship? And she realized that there were certain non-verbal and verbal expectations that was inhibiting her to be her free self. And so the more she aligned with her free self was saying, move on. And so she started moving on. And as she moved on, the partner or the ex-partner started being quite toxic and threatening to her. And so it highlighted to her, the more she moved on, the more she felt aligned in her life energy. And so for me, it was working with her was one of the elements that, as well as the other things that I've shared, that really highlighted, we don't have to talk about, is this toxic or is this abusive or whatever. It's, do I feel lit up and energized like when I was young? Or sometimes we haven't felt that when we were young, but the way we might see our children or young people, or so, do we have access to our curious, exploratory, spontaneous, light-hearted, joyful, creative self? And if we don't, what's inhibiting us, and what can we do to address that? So I just feel like before we finish up, as well as sharing about the relationship dynamic that I think this is what we've been having with the government,
and
a thing is, this is wait a minute,
more tweaking.
Another circle. I just need to put something behind it so you can see it properly. Okay, so if this is the old way of how we've interpreted things, and this is the new way, there's no bridge across from the old to the new, yeah, because this is the way, we don't question things when we're here. It's just the way it is, yeah. And so what we need to do is have an overlap, yeah. And that overlap is a transitional space where then this is a state of confusion, of questioning, yeah, but there's confusion that's not helpful, that just leads to overwhelm, or confusion because we're questioning our reality. We're questioning what makes sense, what in exploring things, reflecting on things, listening to more in our experience, perhaps. And when we can do that, we can enter a transitional space to move from the old to the new. Because then we can go, well, I'll keep this from the old, but I'll throw out that because that no longer. And so we can progress. But people, I think, are very much fixed in the old way, and they don't know how to progress across because they can't stand being with the confusion because they don't know how to sort what's going on. And so the confusion just feels awful. And so they revert back to the old. They don't want to question anything. And so to me, it's a reflection of our capacity doesn't have the skills to be with the unknown and to be able to know how to sort what's true and meaningful for us. And so instead we're swallowing other people's ideas, and it's not integrating with the whole of who we are, but we're just swallowing it because we don't want to rock the boat and disturb what we don't know how to be with.
Yeah, so starting to really pay a lot more attention, prioritize feelings, body feelings, emotional feelings, to start to wake that awareness up, so that you've got that guidance system where in the past maybe we've suppressed those feelings because we've been bombarded with so much information. Like in that previous circle, there was a thing about controlling the information that the person has access to. So wherever we go, there's signs on TV and on the highways and on
every shop,
every shop, and everywhere we go, it's been controlling and bombarding us. And so we need to be able to just kind of tune that out to some degree and tune back into, and and it might be just only a very slight little whisper of a feeling that we need to just pay attention, and then as you pay attention it will grow stronger, and we can say, okay, this doesn't feel right, I don't know why, but it doesn't feel right. And that's enough of a starting point to go into that center point of the uncertain, the confusion thing, right?
Yes, because I think because we've overvalued the left brain, we think that information has to be really loud and big. But inner guidance is often very quiet and soft and subtle, and soft and little and subtle does not mean it's less important or less informing than every, as I think I said, every single woman always had early warning signs that she didn't take. And I know that for myself in my own journey. And it's like the soft and the subtle is so potently valuable, with so much information in there that sets a different direction. And
I agree. This is a blockbuster interview, Anita. This one has to go viral. Please do share it with others. This is a really, really such important information in here. So do please give your contact details. How people can connect with you, because I'm sure that they're going to want to know.
Thank you. So you can see on the screen the spelling of my name. So anitabentata.com is my website. It's not updated because I'm too busy doing everything that I'm doing. So I don't have my current program that I've developed. That's a fast track on how to resolve trauma, stress, anxiety, isolation, how to stay free within yourself, how to trust and listen and grow that inner connection of your inner reality and your connection to all that is that's meaningful for you. I run 30-day journeys on different modules of my method, and with every module, they're standalone, they're complete of themselves. I work from the feminine principle, so you don't have to commit to the whole method. You can do one module and that's all, or do one module and pick and choose what module after that, because I work from the feminine principle where it's not fixed. This is how you've got to do it. You do what's right for you, what feels good for you, what lights you up. I also, because of everything that's going on, there is a fee because I've got to be able to pay my living expenses, but I don't want anyone to miss out on the life skills. So if you've got genuine financial difficulties, you can contribute by donation. So please contact me. There's always, nothing is too small. I would, if everybody puts in a little bit, then we can have a win-win for everyone, and there's amazing skills. So you can email me at anita@anitabentata.com. You can find me on Facebook on The Wolf in a Suit, or on Activating Artemis, my business name, or Google me. I'll come up on Google. Instagram, I'm under my name. So
and your website would have a contact you sort of page as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
plenty of ways. So Anita at anitabentata.com or Facebook or, you know, any of those other ways. And so Anita can help you with whether you've come from a domestic violence situation and you're wanting help with that, or whether you are struggling with the current environment, those sorts of issues, because as you can see, it's the same thing. It's the wolf in different clothing, the sheep in
Yeah,
clothing, you know, like it's that
yeah,
same thing. Yeah.
yeah. And so it was in 2019, I developed a method because I'd been working in the field back then 24 years, and I'd specialized to do with the brain and the body, and I did extra studies to do with neuroscience, and I came up with my what I call the essentials method. So if you want to learn what no one taught you growing up about your own brain, your body, how to maximize, how to work with it, how to optimize your well-being, how to change your outer reality based on, you know, it has to be on that inner reality first, then, you know, happy to send you some information about the essentials method.
Yeah.
And or you can Google my name and you'll read some recent reviews of women that have attended my 30 days and longer programs and the changes in their lives. So, but yeah, happy to help anyone get better skills in navigating whatever you face in life.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you,
So,
Lily.
as a sister, I'm obviously biased, and yet I am perhaps one of the most qualified people to talk about the changes I've seen in Anita from a shy child to in being in a domestic violence sort of situation where she was very, very stuck, and then saw her emerging from that and being incredibly courageous, but still, you know, whatever, and then educating herself, becoming the psychotherapist and helping other people. And then the real thing that inspires me, the shift where she got to, where is now working on a different paradigm level to what she was operating on before, which is that shift from the left brain to the right brain, really, where Anita's whole life and her energy and everything is transformed completely, and the results are stunning and impressive. And I highly recommend that you connect with her.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I realized, if I just add this, that the whole industry that I'm in is unethical, because I've known this for a long time, but it's just really become more and more concerning given the amount of people that are in trauma right now. And I know that there are so many therapists that have waiting lists and aren't taking new people, and there's so many people needing assistance right now. And the reason why the counselling industry is unethical is that every university qualification, whether it's psychology or counselling or psychiatry, you know, anything in that field of mental health, does not provide adequate training, knowledge, skills about how to be with trauma, stress, abuse, and people are being re-traumatized in their therapy or re-traumatized in their ongoing coping mechanisms, and staying in trauma for decades longer when you don't need to be in trauma, no matter what you've experienced. When your system, the brain gets in the way of the way the body and the energy system will release things far quicker. And it's not that the brain's faulty. The brain is not broken. It is brilliant. It's not doing anything wrong. It's just it's just repeating content that's not generative for one's well-being. And people don't realize what they're doing that's contributing to repeating those neural pathways. And so a few years ago, I went through another crisis, and it made me question the way I worked, even though what I'd done was brilliant, because I'd done additional qualification of 4 years that was amazing about developmental trauma, adult trauma, acute trauma, chronic trauma, how the brain works, how the body responds, what the methods can resolve trauma through the brain and the body. But I went through years and years of therapy, hours and hours, and money and journal writing and art and all of, and so what I'm passionate about is you can do it a lot faster, because with the way the brain works and what we know about the mind body system now, we can shift really, really quickly. And so that's what I developed in 2019. And since 2019, I've just refined it based on the more women that have done it. I've learnt where women tend to get stuck, and men get stuck. And so what I've needed to do more of to help people to understand, and what they needed less of that, you know, wasn't so needed. So it's refined. So the Essentials method is awesome, if I can say. And I'm happy to have anyone who wants to have a chat with me and see if it's a good fit for you. Thank you so much, Liliane.
Pleasure. No, that was fantastic. Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to stop the recording, and yeah, please do share with others. This has been really valuable.
Absolutely.